Welcome to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and we have a very special guest in our studio today. Denese Bell is a dedicated education advocate and champion for parental rights based right here in Houston, Texas. She was instrumental in the launch of Moms for Liberty, Harris County, where she serves as the chapter chair. She is also an executive board member for the Moms for Liberty Texas Legislative Committee, where she serves to strengthen parent voices and education policy all across Texas, and additionally serves on the Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids Committee for the Republican Party of Texas. Denise is also active with Pipeline, a parent-led grassroots group focused on improving public education in Spring Branch ISD, and has held various leadership roles in PTAs, faith-based ministries, and community service organizations. She has spoken publicly against the sexualization of children via youth literature and gender ideology, and has challenged numerous books and curriculums for inappropriate content. Denise is also passionate about making parents aware of Marxist and globalist propaganda in public education, and loves to share her perspective on the importance of empowering parents and protecting their right to direct the education of children. Denise, welcome to Azimuth Podcast. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, awesome. Now, before our audience goes and Googles what Moms for Liberty is or looks it up on Wikipedia. Wikipedia is clearly no fan. Their definition is an advocacy group that dares to challenge curriculum, that dares to mention LGBTQ and discrimination. And my thought is, I had to read about discrimination of Jim Crow laws and no one said a thing. So for our audience, what is a more accurate definition of what Moms for Liberty is and their mission?
Right. Well, thank you for asking me that question. We definitely get a bad rap from the media, but I think the best way to describe Moms for Liberty is to state our mission statement, which is fighting for the survival of America by unifying, educating, and empowering parents to defend their parental rights at all levels of government. And then I always add that when we do that, we protect children. Moms for Liberty at its core is a parental rights organization, and that is what makes us unique. We're not anti, any kind of LGBTQ or something like that. We just want to make sure that parents' rights are protected.
Now, how is Moms for Liberty different from other organizations such as Moms for America? What makes Moms for Liberty unique in its approach?
So Moms for Liberty, again, is focused on parental rights, but we're also not a top-down organization. We're very grassroots. And so while we do have a national team, and let me just go back and tell you the history of Moms for Liberty a little bit, but Moms for Liberty formed in January of 2021, shortly after the pandemic, and it was founded by Tina Descovich and Tiffany Justice, who are two former school board members in Florida who were just seeing lots of issues in education. And they thought, what can we do about this? We need to come together as parents and push back. And so they did just that. And what started as a little operation out of their homes in Florida grew to, thousands of members across the United States and over 300 local chapters of Moms for Liberty. And we are organized by county, and that's how we keep it grassroots. So while we do have a mission statement that ties us all together and keeps us all on the same page and, marching to the same drum in terms of what we're fighting for, everything is done at the local level. And we use our local chapters to do that. We're the boots on the ground in the local communities. And communities across the United States have a lot of similar issues, but the things that we focus on may be a little bit different. In certain blue states, for example, gender ideology is really just atrocious and parental rights are under attack. I mean, look at Colorado as an example, where if you're not affirming your child's pronouns, if they're different than their biological sex, you could have your children taken away from you. So, a chapter in Colorado might be spending more time on that than another issue that we might be spending time on, although gender ideology is a problem, across the country. But just being grassroots and able to focus locally in our communities, I think is one of the things that really separates us from other organizations. There are great organizations like Moms for America, I think is one that we've talked about. And they do wonderful things, and we overlap with them a little bit. But again, our focus being parental rights is the bread and butter of what we do.
Okay. Now, how did the Harris County chapter come to be? Can you walk us through its founding and its growth to what it looks like today?
Sure. So I'm really proud of what we've done. It was definitely a labor of love to get it going, as it is with any, nonprofit organization. We had to go through a lot of red tape and paperwork to get established here in Harris County. But in the fall of 2023, I was approached by a friend of mine that I know from other advocacy work that I've been doing in Texas. And she asked me if I'd be interested in helping to start this chapter. And I mean, Harris County is the fourth largest, or I think it's the largest county in Texas and one of the largest counties in the United States. And we really need to have representation for parents here locally. So I agreed that I would like to take on this challenge. And I found some other women who are willing to launch the chapter with me. And we had our first official meeting in November of 23. And since then, we've been consistent, we've had momentum, we've gained a lot of members, and we're really making some progress here in Harris County. There's still so much to do, but I'm really proud of how far we've come in less than 2 years.
Yes, it's really taking off. For this fall, what aspects of schooling will Moms for Liberty Harris County be focusing on?
So if I may, let me just talk about some of the things that we've done previously and why we're going to talk about the things that we're going to go to this fall. But, there are so many different parental rights issues, and Moms for Liberty Harris County has established different initiatives, things that we are going to focus on that we feel like are impacting parents here in, locally Harris County in Texas. And sexualization of children, stopping that. In our schools, because it's unfortunately happening quite a bit. Boundaries are being broken down with even very young children. So that's one of our initiatives. We also want to raise awareness for the whole school, whole community, whole child initiative, which is something that we focused on a lot this past spring, and we'll continue to talk about that because it is such an infringement of parental rights, where the school would be, the school is now trying, not the school, but the state of education is trying to take the role of the parent and providing for all of the child's needs. And we really want to make sure parents understand that that's the direction of education, and a lot of money is being funded into that initiative. So talking about whole school, whole community, whole child, health centers on campus, social emotional learning. Those are some of the things that we've talked about this past spring. We also talked about medical freedom in the past and your rights, being able to send your child to school without a mask, or perhaps you don't want your child to have a certain vaccination, but the school is requiring it. How do you deal with that? How can you look to get an exemption possibly in the state of Texas? So those are just some examples of what we've done in the past. And we felt like this fall, especially with the climate that's going on politically right now, it was really important to touch on Marxism and education. And really, that's an overarching theme for a lot of the things we do, including stopping the sexualization of children, because one of the ways that Marxists continued their march through the institution of education is by breaking down those boundaries with children and really essentially hurting children and hurting the family unit. And so anyway, we're going to touch on Marxism. We're going to do a kickoff event in August, on August 26th, and we'll have more details about that, where we're going to be showing a documentary called Beneath Sheep's Clothing, and it's produced by Julie Belling. She's fantastic. She's so knowledgeable. She spent a lot of time in Russia. She has a background in, I think, Russian history. I can't remember her exact background, but it's a very informative documentary, and I think it will be shocking to some people. But we want to open eyes. We don't want to ever scare people. We just think that you can't do anything if you don't have the truth, if you don't know what's really going on. So part of how we empower parents is by educating them that these are issues you should be looking for. So we're going to have this kickoff event in August, and then we'll have a chapter meeting in September. and we'll post those dates on our website shortly, but we will talk about Marxism in education at that meeting. It'll be our topic for the evening. We're going to discuss gender ideology at our October chapter meeting. In November, we are most likely going to be talking about the data collection and data mining of our children. And so all of those things kind of tie back into Marxism.
Well, I have a couple questions from all that for our audience. First of all, I want to note that you mentioned that the person that produced the film is Russian, so they would know something about communism, right? So I think there's some credibility there for sure.
Well, she's not Russian, but she spent time in Russia.
Time in Russia.
Yes, I believe she studied over there or went over there for ministry, or I can't remember exactly, but she spent a lot of time in that country and interviewing a lot of people, and her background is just tremendous. So.
Yeah, so she definitely knows what she's talking about.
Yes, she does.
Yes. So you mentioned this whole community, whole child. Can you talk more about that?
So that's the WSCC or WSC acronym for whole school, whole community, whole child. And that was a framework that was developed officially about 10 years ago, about a decade ago, between the CDC and the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development. It was a joint effort. However, the concept of whole child, has been around for a long, long time. And it's basically, parents, we think of parents as taking care of all of the child's needs,
right.
Physical needs, their social needs, their emotional needs, medical needs. It's the parents' role to take care of their children, right?
Yes.
And so that's just kind of taken for granted, I think, by many parents today that, they send their child off to school and they think the school is just providing a traditional education. They're going to teach your child about history and science and how to read and, perform math. But that is not what is happening, and that is not what is intended to happen. The intention is for schools to be community schools and to provide for the entire well-being of a child. And that, to me, is extremely scary. And we've been going down this slippery slope. We've been kind of like a frog in a pot of water that just slowly comes up to a boil without realizing what's happening to us. And we're giving up rights little by little. So an example of this would be there's 10 components in the WSCC framework, and I'm not going to go through all of those. One of those components is health centers. So one of the aspects of community schools is to provide medical and mental health care on campus. And that can be done in different ways. It can be done in an actual physical clinic on a school campus, and that is happening. It could also be done via telehealth. And telehealth is almost just as problematic as in person.
Right.
But what's happening is that parents are taking advantage of these services that are offered and marketed to them as a free service and a convenient service.
Right.
So if you're a full-time parent, or maybe you're working 3 jobs, or maybe you don't have insurance, here's the school telling you, oh, your child is sick or your child has an issue.
You don't have to pay. You don't have to take time off work to take your kid and worry about it, but then anything can happen.
Exactly. You are taken out of the equation. You might get some notes from the meeting, but you're not in the meeting with the doctor.
Right.
And you're not guiding your child. You're not making those decisions. You're giving up your right to make those medical care decisions or mental health care decisions to the provider.
Right.
And I think we as parents, and especially just kind of human nature, we want to think that everyone has our best interests in mind.
Yeah, especially kids. Like, who wants to hurt kids?
Right. And I think we also think back to our own childhood and our own education, and maybe we have really good memories from that, and I certainly do. The problem is that, and not all the providers, not all the doctors or nurses or teachers that are offering these services or, whatever tasks they're doing in the classroom are necessarily having sinister motives. The problem is that the direction of that particular framework and initiative was started by people that have motives that they are using innocent people that think they're doing good things for kids to further an agenda. And that agenda is to take parental rights away and trust those rights into the state to provide for the child. And I believe it's a way to get socialism, Marxism, communism into America without Americans even noticing it.
Well, yeah. So I looked at the framework myself, and it has this feel-good, flowery language in it, and it kind of seems as though it's making the parents feel, okay, the school's on your side. And, we live in an era of feeling, so if the parents are feeling stressed out, overworked, tired, of course they can take care of my kids' medical needs at the school. Okay, yeah, they can do the mental health counseling or whatever. It's kind of, but you run the risk of this construction worker mentality. We've all seen it, these construction zones where there are like 9 people out there and one person's working.
Right.
Well, it's not going to be the parent working, and the next thing you know, the state basically owns your child. That's how I view it.
Yeah.
I did look at some of the the components for that, and I noticed some ironies. Like physical activity was one of them. Yet our kids are fatter than ever, and they spend less and less time during recess and PE. Instead of the mental health and the gender ideology, can we please put them on the playground more and not wussify, as I call the playground so much? They look so boring. I'm like, I wouldn't want to play on that either. Everything's so short, because we're overly litigious. Another thing that I saw was employee wellness, which just came across as HR jargon with no teeth. And then the family engagement, I go, well, families aren't going to be very engaged if, once again, you have doctor's appointments that the parents don't know about, or they don't know all the details about, or they try to dare speak up at a public school, public school board meeting, and they get rushed out, or they're transitioning your child without you knowing. Those don't work with family engagement at all. So I found the whole thing hypocritical.
It's very disjointed, and really families are placed in the outer circle in that framework. They're not the primary concern. It's bringing the community involved with your child and bringing services to your child on the campus that the school determines your child needs, and it's for their well-being. And it doesn't really matter what you as a parent think. We know what's best for your child. And in fact,
trust the experts.
Yes. And there was a quote I read, I think, when you were in one of our meetings, from a superintendent at LA Unified School District, where he's talking about where are all the needs of the child met: the social, emotional, medical, mental health, the well-being, general well-being of this child. And he said, he actually said, it's not at home, it's at school. That is insulting to me. Now, certainly there are some children that are in the foster care system or, an abusive situation. Maybe that could be true for a select minority of students, but it is not the vast majority of American parents or parents across the world. And our parental rights, this is something that's really important to Moms for Liberty. We view parental rights as inalienable. They are not given to us by the government. No. They are given to us by God, our creator, just like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and so the government has no right to take away rights that they didn't give us to begin with.
Exactly.
And it's very insulting that this model believes that the best way to meet all the needs of the child is at the school. And the initiative is very concerning. If you go dive into it and you do the reading, it's right there. The intention is for every school to be a community school. That means private schools too. That's not just the public school system. And it includes a lot of mental health components. And it is true that mental health issues have risen in everybody, including children, over the last few decades, even the last few years. I think since the pandemic, I don't remember the exact statistics, but it's skyrocketed. However, I think the more you look into this, the more you realize it's one of those situations where a problem might have been created so that it could be solved a certain way.
Right.
And so, we have this huge mental health crisis. We've got to fix this. We've got to throw everything
at
this.
Even though we helped create it.
Yeah, we've got to throw the kitchen sink at this thing. We got to attack it, right? And so there's so many resources being thrown into the WSCC framework at the federal level and at the state level. And that includes a lot of mental health counseling to our students. is mental health getting better? I mean, they've been investing this money for a while now.
Right.
I think in 23 or 24, I can't remember. This is in a Learning Policy Institute document, so your listeners can go and look that up. But the statistic that I read from that document was $119 billion in federal funding was put towards the WSCC WISC initiative, and that did not include the COVID funds. There were separate funds, which were also, I think it was greater than $119 billion. It was, over that in the billions of dollars towards COVID. And those dollars could also be used towards things like social emotional learning. So if you wanted to implement a social emotional learning curriculum into your school, you could use those funds for it. So we're throwing all this money at it. We've been doing it for years, but mental health is not getting better. It's getting worse. But then they're going to tell us, well, it's because we haven't invested enough. We need to do more. And parents have got to realize this and push back and speak out against it. That's the only way to stop it.
Right. And meanwhile, we're investing all this money and our math scores just are going down the toilet.
Right.
I think that's where the focus should be.
Yeah.
We also mentioned gender ideology and how many schools are pushing it. And a lot of conservative podcasters and social media commenters just think Texas is this blood red state. And I'm sorry to say, but even in Pearland, Texas, I had a friend whose first grader knew what a drag queen was.
Right.
And I mean, that's Pearland, Texas. That's so
Right.
upsetting to me. But some people say that gender ideology has Marxist roots. What are the Marxist roots?
So gender ideology comes out of queer theory, and queer theory is a critical theory, just like critical race theory. So it's part of neo-Marxist thought. And really the idea behind queer theory is that sexuality is on a spectrum. It's not you're not completely straight, you're not completely gay, you're somewhere in this fluid ocean of sexuality. And that goes for gender as well. And it's a very destructive ideology. I believe that all goes back to the way that Marxists could take over the United States obviously could be through violent, revolution, violent revolutionaries, which we've seen some of those people at these protests, right? We know there are people like that, and that, unfortunately, that number of violent, revolutionary kind of people is growing in the United States. But then there's also Marxists that believe that you can play within the system and change the rules and all of that.
Change the language.
Right. And I believe both are at work with gender ideology and queer theory, because what that ultimately leads to is the destruction of the family. The goal of queer theory is to destroy the gender binary. And then if you do that, you can really hurt the family. And if you can destroy the family is what socially reproduces capitalism. And, so Marxists know that they have to get to the family. They have to destroy the family. They have to hurt people through, cultural change and through education to get the destruction of the family. And if you can destroy the family, you can weaken the culture, and you're more likely to say, look, everything's a mess. Capitalism isn't working. We've got to have Marxism now. This is the solution. We've got to have equity. Everybody's the same, equal outcomes, all of that. But that's, if I were just to boil it down into something, and it's much more complicated than that. But at its simplest form, it's really about the destruction of the family and the gender binary. And of course, Marxism exists to destroy capitalist principles, which is private property ownership. And private property ownership doesn't just include our home and our car and things like that. It also includes our rights. Parental rights are a form of private property. Right.
I think all this, the Marxist agenda is designed to ultimately destroy. It doesn't really create anything. It promises things, but it doesn't really create anything. And it's opposed to any sort of order. And the family unit is God's original order system.
Exactly. And really, Marxism is kind of like a religion, honestly. You have to have a lot of faith in that system for it to work. You have to do a lot of mental gymnastics. And they call it cognitive dissonance, that I've got cognitive dissonance according to a Marxist because I can't see how it works, right?
Right.
But to them, they can work out all of these things in their head, and it's just great because they're so intelligent. They're so much more superior than we are. They have all this enlightenment that we don't have. And
they went to a fancy university.
Right, right. And the only reason that Marxism hasn't worked, according to a Marxist, is because it hasn't been implemented the right way. But the scary thing is that they are reaching kids in our colleges, and it's actually starting much younger than that through things like gender ideology, destroying the gender binary at a young age. I mean, you and I both know there are preschool books targeted on gender to our kids, and these are showing up in our schools. Even in my very red school district, there was a book called What Are Your Words? And it was a book about pronouns in one of the libraries. We raised the flag on that, and it was removed. But even in very red areas, you cannot let your guard down and think that your child is not going to be exposed to these concepts. And I will also say that it starts at a very young age, the planting of seeds on collectivism instead of individualism. And that is the institution of education being captured many decades ago and making inroads and strides little by little that have gotten us to where we are today. And I have examples of that my own children have had in their own curriculum in our school district.
Some people act like this stuff that's just happened overnight, and it's been happening slowly for a long time. I remember my first English class in college. I thought, okay, we're going to read Shakespeare. My grammar is going to be even better. I'm going to learn proper punctuation and stuff.
Right.
No, it was how the Taco Bell dog is racist. How Jar Jar Binks is racist. This is 2002.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was like, what on earth is this? And, they grade your paper in different areas like grammar, punctuation, style, and the grammar and various things. 5 out of 5. But I would nearly fail the paper, and I would have my friends read it. And looking back, I'm like, maybe I came off as conservative.
Right.
What if it was that?
Very possible. And you went into that class innocently trying to learn, and you were earnestly trying to do a good job, and you were presented something in a very slanted way. That's terrible. That's the indoctrination that's been going on little by little, and it's certainly gotten worse since then. But we've had it for a long time in education. One of my daughters took as a junior in high school, and this is offered throughout the state of Texas at public high schools. It's UT on-ramps courses. So you get dual credit. You get high school credit and college credit for a class. And the class that my daughter chose to take that year was rhetoric. So it was all writing. Well, an innocent person, or just someone that what do you think when you're signing up for that class? Oh, I'm going to be writing different papers, probably on different topics, right? No, the entire year. And if you go, I had their curriculum. They did send me that. I had a hard time finding it online, but after she'd been in the class for a while, I requested a call with UT, and I did have a long conversation with them, a friendly debate, I guess. So they sent me the curriculum, and basically, they're having the students write through the lens of race, gender, and ethnicity the entire year. So every paper they did was through that lens. Now, obviously, that's Marxism right there. You are doing, it's the mere exposure effect. You are causing people to be exposed to something over and over and over again.
And they adopt it eventually.
Through a biased lens. It's not like it's honest, right? It's a biased, slanted view that, yes, there is oppression. And that's the Marxist playbook right there, oppressor versus the oppressed narrative, right? So you've got all this oppression, and you're going to write through the lens of oppression with gender, race, and ethnicity the entire year. You're not going to be writing about what you did over the summer, or maybe some, historical event that happened, or some, fun travel destination. No, you're not writing about anything else except through that lens. So it's propaganda indoctrination, but it's also crushing to a student who's trying to learn to write well. Right. What student wants to do that? Like, are they excited to go to that class and write? I don't think so. I think it's a disservice to our students, and I think it's taking advantage of education to push an agenda. It's not about educating our children. It's to churn out little collectivist activists who are going to be, workers for the state. It's not about the best interests of the child then. So I was really disappointed that my daughter was in that class, that we allowed her to take that class. Right. We kind of knew a little bit ahead of time going into that class, but it wasn't until she was in it and I saw the actual curriculum. By then it was too late to drop it. But it's really sad how our children have been propagandized to like that.
Yeah.
And it's also, I just want to say too, it's also sad that our tax dollars are paying for that. That is insulting to the American people. I think if the American people knew some of the things that we've uncovered in schools, and we post about them, we talk about them in our meetings. I've mentioned a few things here, like the rhetoric class. But I think that if more Americans knew, they would be furious. I mean, there are a lot of things that came up this past winter with Elon Musk and what he uncovered with USAID. And I mean, it's unbelievable what we've been paying for. But when you are talking about education, this is the future of your country. These are the future citizens that are going to be the leaders. They're going to be your doctors, your educators, your lawyers, your truck drivers, whatever. And you're teaching them to hate America. You're teaching them to think that they are either an oppressor or an oppressed victim. That's so unhealthy for our country, and it's not what our country was founded on. It's not what our country stands for, and we need to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, if you hate your country, you're definitely not going to fight for it. If you hate a place, you're not going to care about litter or graffiti or what their rules and laws are. But also the oppressed complex, it's kind of a depressive state.
Yeah.
So how motivating is that to go work for something? It's not.
And you can't escape it because you're either one or the other, and neither are good. If you're the oppressor and you're always the oppressor and you're never going to be better than that, that's awful. And if you're always the victim, that's awful too. Neither state is good, right? No. So
it's not a happy or productive mental state of mind to be.
No.
But other subjects in school, such as race, gender identity, sexuality, is there ever an appropriate approach or age for schools to talk about those at all?
Well, I would say with sexuality, absolutely not. I think with sex ed, and that's a whole other topic we could spend hours on. Maybe we can do that again some other time. But, today sex education is comprehensive sex education, and it's a lot of things. It's not just biology. I think teaching children biology and how their body works, that's important. That's an important part of education, as long as it's very transparent to the parents and it's very clear what is being taught and it sticks to science. This has gone off the rails, though, because that's not what it's about. It's about liberation and, just being you and doing whatever you want. And again, it's, talking about sexuality on a continuum and everything's normal and everything's good, and introducing concepts that are really inappropriate for the school setting, like sex toys. And I mean, there are young children, elementary age, that are being exposed to sex toys. And a little tangent, if I can just take it here, this has nothing, it's not really necessarily a parental rights and education issue, but if you just go to Walmart, I don't know if they've moved this, but last fall I did a little reporting on this on my X account, but these sex toys, and of course the condoms and the lubricant and all of that, is on the same aisle as toothpaste and toothbrushes. So you've got children's toothbrushes, with Mickey or Disney characters or, trucks or whatever, right next to, at eye level, things like dildos, vibrators, tush toys, it went well beyond what, I don't even know when these sex toys started coming into regular stores like Walmart.
I thought that was what Cindy's was for.
Exactly. So there actually was an effort to pass legislation. I honestly don't know where that bill ended up this past session. Hillary Hicklin was the author of that bill, but to stop those kinds of toys from being sold in stores. And, I would think even just putting parameters on it, like, I don't want them sold in the public store. I think that's completely
Right.
inappropriate, but certainly not product placement right next to, and products
Kids
that
stuff.
children would be in that aisle. Children often go to the store with their parents. Picking out a toothbrush could be a reward. It was just completely inappropriate. So, but anyway, back to comprehensive sex ed. The issue is breaking down barriers, breaking kids down, breaking down those boundaries that used to exist between adults and children. And again, that goes back to really destroying the culture. Why do you want to do that? Because you've got to destroy something to be able to rebuild it into the model that you want it to be. So again, I believe it all comes back to Marxism. But I don't think that sexuality or gender should be talked about in schools, gender at all. It's not appropriate at all. And again, it is part of queer theory, which is a Marxist ideology. So there's no place for that in school. I think what is important to teach children is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would like, as they would do unto you. Act to others as you would like to be treated. You treat other children in a nice way and they will treat you back in a nice way. That is what is the basic thing, just basic common courtesy and politeness that we need to be teaching children. We don't need to be teaching them all these other things, that, and the theory is that, well, you've got to expose children to all these different lifestyles and things so they're accepting of them. No, you don't. You just need to teach children to be polite and respectful, and everything else will fall into place.
Well, I can tell you with the 6 and 8 year old, the schools are not enforcing that. Long time ago, they've abandoned yes, sir, yes, ma'am, or, addressing. I still feel awkward at 41 years old referring to my kid's teacher as Miss First Name. It was always Miss Last Name or
Right.
Mrs.
Yes.
Last Name. But yeah, the thank you, please is
Yes.
not enforced at all. And yes, everything's about feelings and not, well, okay, John, you saw Johnny hit Susie. Well, how would that make, him feel if she hit him back, type of thing.
Right.
The golden rule. And so
Right.
I definitely agree with you there. So clearly the schools aren't interested in parents and what they have to say, but what would you say is the role parents should play in shaping schools' curriculum, and should there be any sort of line between parental rights and school educational standards?
I think there should always be very open communication and full disclosure by public schools, private schools, anybody that has access to your children, that you are entrusting your children's care to for any amount of time, whether it's 30 minutes to 8 hours a day in school. Parents have a right to know what's going on in the classroom. In the case of public schools, our tax dollars are paying for everything in there, the textbooks, the curriculum, the teacher salaries, everything. So not only do parents have a right to know how that money is being used and what's being taught in the schools, any taxpayer has the right to know what's going on. So I think transparency is sorely lacking, and everyone has a right to know what's going on in public education. It is unbelievable to me how hard it can be as a parent to know exactly what your child is being taught. The law in Texas is that if I wanted to see the curriculum that my child is being taught, I should have access to it. The reality is they don't always make it easy.
Right.
So, for example, if I ask to see the literacy curriculum that's being used in the school, they might make me come down, look at it make an appointment that might not be convenient for me. The time frame, if I'm a working parent or whatever, I would have a little bit of time to come in and view it. And then they would check the box that they were transparent and allowed me to see the curriculum. But that's not really, that's not fair to parents. Parents deserve more than that. There's a situation in my school district where a teacher wanted to share what books were available in her classroom, and she was reprimanded for sharing that with parents. That's unbelievable, right? I mean, I kudos to that teacher. She's a wonderful person. I'm so grateful for teachers like her that do the right thing. And we're very supportive of teachers. They have a very hard job, and we greatly appreciate the ones that are good teachers, that are there for the reason that they love children and they want to educate, right? That's a good teacher. If they're teaching without bias and just, teaching kids to read well and love history and science and accurate information, that's great. the unfortunate thing is that there are some teachers that got in the profession not because they love teaching, but because they see it as a way to be able to do their activism. Right?
Exactly.
And unfortunately, there are colleges that have churned out a lot of students that realize this is a great way for me to spread my view of the world and, infuse it into the minds of children. I'm going to get an education so that I can further my cause.
There used to be a saying, if a kid came home from college and they were super liberal, people would just say, oh, they'll go out and get a real job and they'll grow out of it, and unfortunately that has turned out to not be true. They became the lawyers and the doctors and, the teachers and filtrated all of this. With the transparency you just mentioned, I think that's what people really loved about what Elon Musk was doing, just making things so transparent. And I remember when I was in school, and it was probably the same for you, I think it was 5th grade, they separated the girls and the boys. I think they typically sent home a permission slip beforehand to say, okay, we're going to have the girls watch the scariest movie they'll ever see in their lives, a woman giving birth. Right. But, and the boys, I don't know, go play with trucks or something. I have no idea. But supposedly just, a 15-minute conversation about, okay, you are going to hit puberty within the next few years. These are things that happen, just realize they're normal. And I mean, it was a very surface level type of thing. It didn't tell you how to do sex. Right. And that's the thing that I think most of us are thinking, like, first of all, permission slip, transparency. Personally, I think, look, we're so far off the rails that if schools are going to talk about it at all, it needs to be in a gymnasium with the parent sitting right next to the kid. Right. Or, okay, we're going to show this DVD. We sent you home a copy so you can preview it first. Or here's a pamphlet. You teach it to your kids. Or something like that. But there is no rhyme or reason to talk about the toys or how to do anything.
Right. Well, and there's an agenda, again, for doing that. And it, again, is to destroy, I think, the family is what it all comes back to. But it is, comprehensive sex ed is all-encompassing. It includes things like sex positivity, using the toys, BDSM. These are all things that are talked about in classrooms across the United States. And I encourage your viewers to go look up websites like CCUS or Planned Parenthood to get an idea. There's something called Amaze videos, amaze.org, that you can find on YouTube, and you can see how they're being marketed to children. They're little cartoons, and it's really disturbing when you go and look those up. So I encourage your viewers to do some research and look into it and see how dark this area is. But maybe I can come back sometime. We can talk about that more.
Absolutely. Now, there's been controversy over certain books featuring such things. How does Moms for Liberty decide what's appropriate or what should be reviewed, and is there a clear set of guidelines?
There really is not a clear set of guidelines. I kind of look at sexually explicit material as my husband will tell me what he thinks the definition of pornography is. He'll say, I don't really know, but I know it when I see it.
Exactly.
And so we used to have a very good understanding, pretty clear-cut, black and white, what was appropriate and what wasn't. And we've really, like I said, the boundaries have been blurred. And we've broken kids down little by little, and things that were unacceptable just 5 years ago are suddenly acceptable. And not only are they acceptable, but we better, tolerate them or acknowledge that they're good, right? Or we're the bad people now. But I view sexually explicit material as, anything that is graphic in nature. What would be an example? There's a lot of books that I have challenged in my school district. So one of the first books that I challenged was called Out of Darkness, and it's a book by Ashley Hope Perez. And it describes in pretty graphic detail a girl being gang raped. And it was available in my son's middle school at the time, as well as high schools. It's just completely inappropriate. You don't need to offer that to children. Again, it's our tax dollars paying for that. So it's there's two issues here. The material being available to children and taxpayers are funding it. That's just got to stop, right?
At the very least, people should be upset about that.
Right. And it's never about book banning. I hate the term book banning. I feel like it's inflammatory rhetoric that's used by the left to elicit a response from people. Like, oh, that's terrible. These book banners. This is, against freedom of speech. It's censorship, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not. I don't want any book banned in the United States. I don't like every book in the United States. I am an avid reader and I appreciate great literature, and I recognize that sometimes there might be some books that have content that's not appropriate for young children. It might be a great work of literature. It's just not appropriate for children, not appropriate in the classroom. Taxpayers shouldn't be paying for it. So whenever someone tells me about book banning, I say no. What we want to do is remove books that are not age appropriate in the classroom. And there's actually legal precedent for that. And the left likes to use this case against us, but it actually is for us. And that's the Pico Supreme Court case in the 1970s. And what came out of that court case wasn't great, all of it, but what came out of it was that schools have the ability to remove books that fall under two criteria. One, if books are not educationally suitable, or two, if they're pervasively vulgar. Now, not educationally suitable is a very broad term, but that's good in a way, because when we get super specific about what is inappropriate, then if something happens to fall outside that boundary, then maybe it could stay there. This enables a school board or a superintendent to go, you know what, this is just not educationally suitable. There's not an exact definition for porn, but I know it when I see it.
Right.
And so that's good, right? Pervasively vulgar is a little bit more specific because it's pervasively vulgar, not just vulgar. So if you got 2 F-bombs, is that pervasively vulgar? Is 10 F-bombs pervasively vulgar? Or does it take 50 F-bombs to be pervasively vulgar? There's a book called The Hate You Give. It's not a sexually explicit book. It is an anti-racist book, which anti-racist books are not about not being racist. They're about doing the work to further the oppressor versus oppressed narrative and ultimately Marxism. So you are an anti-racist by doing the work. You're not an anti-racist because you're not being racist. You know what I mean?
Right.
So The Hate You Give is one of those books. It is a fiction. It's a work of fiction. It's not a nonfiction book. But in that book, there are more than 50 F-bombs. So I challenged that book because it was being used in the classroom in a middle school in my school district, not just in the library. And the result of that challenge, the school district did not remove it, but it is restricted, is my understanding. And I hope to goodness it's not being used in curriculum. But that's an example of it's vulgar. To me, that's pervasively vulgar, right? Yeah. But then you could always fall back to, well, it's just not educationally suitable. So could the school district have removed it completely? I feel they could have, but they decided to restrict it.
Well, I find the whole, censorship, book banning argument to be completely ridiculous because we have, ratings on movies.
Yes.
We have ratings on video games. So if I think a rated R movie is inappropriate for my 8-year-old,
right.
Well, I think some of those books are also inappropriate for my 8-year-old.
Yes. If they were acted out the exact same way that they are written, then they would be X-rated content. Certainly R-rated, but maybe in some cases even X-rated. And to your point, we put warnings on music labels as well. And it's a little bit more loose there, I think, I don't know exactly what the rating system is for music, but it does say mature adult content on a lot of different, music that you can buy. So parents have an awareness. You can buy the clean version or the bad version.
Right. And there's no option for these books, but also if it's inappropriate for the school board full of adults, typically over 40 years old, to hear, and if I would get in trouble for handing these books out on a street corner to kids.
Right.
Why can the schools do it?
Exactly. And you bring up also another point. There are the FCC guidelines, right? So there are certain things you can't say across the airwaves.
Right.
I read a book in a school board meeting called Looking for Alaska. And it's by John Green, and it's not appropriate for kids. It's just not appropriate in middle or high school. And I read a section of the book that described oral sex between 2 minors. And I was able to read it in the school board meeting. They allowed me to do it, and I hate doing that. It is so uncomfortable. But and I didn't get into this earlier, I feel compelled and called to raise awareness. I feel like God has given me a calling that I have to speak up about this. I have to let people know. I have to speak against it too. And I've got to say, what are we doing? We've got to stop, right? We've got to stop hurting children. But anyway, I read this passage in the school board meeting. This is a book that I had challenged. And in this particular case, I had heard back from the school district that they were going to keep the book. And the review committee that gave me the report back on it said things like, it has incredible vocabulary and just all this nonsense. And here I am.
So does Shakespeare.
Right. So anyway, then Michael Berry actually got wind of my public comment, and he tried to read what I read on air, but he couldn't even read all the same things that I did in the school board meeting, and the same thing that any kid could read, right? So anyway, it's really hypocritical. It's ridiculous. We all know it is. This, again, not about book banning. You can buy or borrow any book you want in the United States, and I want you to do that. And if you want to give your child a certain book, okay, you have that right. I will say, though, would you give your child a Playboy? Or if you gave your child a Playboy, or you gave them pornography to watch on television, could CPS come after you for abusing your child, for providing sexually explicit content to your child? Possibly. So I don't think these books belong in the hands of children, but nobody is trying to ban them. And that is just inflammatory rhetoric when they say that.
Exactly. Now, a lot of focuses on public schools. There are websites to help parents watch out for certain school districts, like a website, schoolboardwatchlist.org. However, these websites don't really talk anything about private schools. Do you know of any resources for private school parents, and what are things that they should be on the lookout for?
So I think private school parents, the leverage that they have is that they're paying tuition to their private school, and they have to be just as vigilant as public school. I think a lot of private school parents take their children out of public school because they see issues, and then they just have this false sense of security that their children are going to be safe in a private school, and that's not true. There are some very good private schools. I'm not saying that there aren't, but I will say that I toured a private school with my son last year, and I loved the school. But I got enough on that tour to realize that I was going to be paying a lot of money, and my child was still going to be having social emotional learning and a lot of collectivist ideology thrown at them. And so parents have to be vigilant, whether their children are public or private. They have to know what's in their libraries, in the school libraries. They have to know what books are available in the classroom. They have to know and pay attention to what the teacher is teaching their children in the classroom. And I feel for parents. I have 4 children. My oldest is in college, and my youngest is going to be going into middle school. So I've been in this parental gig for a long time, and it's challenging as a parent, especially when you have multiple children, to really stay on top of all the things your children are doing. We all fall short of that. There's no way I can monitor every single thing my children are doing, but I better stay on top of as much as I can, because if I don't, then bad things are going to happen. I think it's important for parents to pick up the text. Kids don't use textbooks much anymore. Okay. Occasionally they do. So look at those books. But if it's not in a textbook, look online. A lot of schools are using a learning management system. They'll have curriculum available online. Check it out. What are the lessons that they're getting? There's also supplemental curriculum. And this gets really scary because, like I said, in the state of Texas, you as a parent have a right to view the curriculum that is officially being used in the school district. But teachers can also provide supplemental curriculum, and that could be a website that the teacher goes, this looks good. I think I'll share this. And I'll give you an example. A teacher was teaching a class in my son's high school. He'll have this class next year. So I didn't have a student in this class, but they were teaching a lesson on genocide. And they decided to use a supplemental lesson from the Democracy Labs, which your viewers can go and look that up. Democracy Labs is a very far left-leaning organization. I'm sure there's Soros funding. I think I found that there was. And this lesson on genocide was a chart that included all the things President Trump had done and then tying all those things back to a point of genocide. So, and this lesson was taught in January, which was around the time that Trump began everything with Tom Homan with the, ICE deportations and all of that. So I felt like it was very intentional. Now, a parent did discover that because it was put on the learning management system that our school district uses. And so it was reported. I made school board members aware of it. But it's key. Parents have to stay vigilant. And then when they see something, call it out. Email the superintendent. Email your school board members. I will say that anytime you correspond with a public official, whether it's a school district or, the mayor or anybody, recognize that your communication is it can be retrieved through FOIA or, public information requests. So I always encourage people to be very professional, and because anything you say can then it's public information, right? But hold them accountable because it is public information. So now they're on the line, they have to respond to that. And I think it's really important for parents to speak out. So.
My son just finished second grade, and last school year he asked if he could read Wings of Fire. It's a book series, and I don't know all the freshly written stuff, so I had to go look it up, and I had to tell him, no, you can't, because I couldn't tell him why, because he's 8 and we have not had that conversation yet.
Right.
But it has gay characters.
Yes.
And I'm just like, I don't know what to look for,
Yes.
I know they're probably not getting all the classics at school like we had to read in school. And so I went to the library in the Heights, and it seemed that every book, not one had been written more than 30 years ago.
Right. This is very sad. You bring up a great point. If you go and look in a public school library at the classics section, it's very small. It's one of my favorite classics growing up was The Count of Monte Cristo. Loved that book by Alexander Dumas. It's a great story, and of course he wrote other great literature. I think I found maybe one copy of that in my school district throughout all of the public school libraries that we have. And I've asked the schools, our district, why don't you have more classics? And the answer is, well, we want to get kids excited about reading, and they're just not as excited about this. But you know what? That's insulting. There is so much good, rich literature out there that will help children, stretch them and grow them. They need this great literature. A lot of the books that are written today, some of them may be rich literature and are, written well, but a lot of them are not. They're poorly written. So it's not only just the topic, it's how basic the writing is. It's not stretching our children. So it's an insult to say children won't like these books. I think it's an excuse to get their books in that they want to promote their activism for their cause. I really believe that, because if you also look, I encourage your viewers to go and look at what's on display in the public libraries. What are the librarians putting on the top of the bookshelves and highlighting, right? An example would be when I went into the high school library a couple of years ago just to kind of poke around and see what was there. The sports fiction section was very small, and every book was just in the bookshelf, so you could just see the spine. But there was one book that was highlighted, and I'm like, oh, let me look at this. Well, it's a story about a transgender athlete playing football and having a love affair with one of the football players. It was like, it was ridiculous. So that's what was being highlighted in sports fiction. And then, of course, throughout the library, what was on top of the bookshelves being displayed were a lot of anti-racist books, CRT, gender ideology. It was just really awful, and it was very blatantly obvious to me what they were pushing towards the kids to read. So anyway, there's a lot of issues. And one other thing you mentioned is that your 8-year-old, wanted to read this series. If you go to Amazon or you're looking at Scholastic or any of these companies, what they're promoting is appropriate for, say, the 8 to 12-year-old age range.
It was one of the first ones mentioned if you look for books for 8-year-old boys.
Right. You cannot trust their system. Again, they've been breaking down the boundaries for a long time, and what they have determined now is appropriate is not appropriate. It just isn't. It's, again, the I know it when I see it thing. This isn't appropriate. One of the things that got me into this advocacy happened shortly after the pandemic, and we were all paying attention more as parents at that time. One of my sons was 10 at the time, in 5th grade, and he was assigned a book to read called Dragon Wings by Lawrence Yep, and it's actually a very good book. However, it was completely inappropriate for a 10-year-old. Now, I happened to read this book, thank goodness, the whole thing, alongside him. So I knew exactly what he was reading, and we could talk about it. But I was disgusted and mad. And yes, I brought it up in a school board meeting. But basically, this book talks about prostitution, brothels, opium dens, and it also refers to whites as demons. Now, the premise of this story is about Chinese immigrants in the early 1900s and some of the racial injustice that they experienced. Okay, that's fine. But it just wasn't appropriate for a 10-year-old. Yes, and I was very angry because it took away some of the innocence my son had. I had to explain what some of those things were, and I really didn't want to. But he was having this, as part of his class. So anyway, it's just completely inappropriate. But Amazon lists that as good for 8 to 12-year-olds. That's the age range for this book and how it's marketed. So you cannot trust anything that the publishers or the American Library Association especially are pushing on your children.
Even if someone doesn't care about these issues so much, another issue that I had with the more current books for kids, I noticed this probably 3 years ago when my kids started bringing home library books, is they go to an international school. And so they would be told to pick out 2 English books and 2 French books. Well, when you're talking about a 3-year-old or 4 or 5-year-old, I'm having to read the books, and my French is not that good. And so I noticed that the English books were very short, super easy to read. I mean, mostly illustration, which is fine. It's a kid's book. But very few words. And so it's very few words for the kid to practice reading along with. And the French books were so long. And then my French is so bad, it would take me 50 times longer to read them. I'm like, we're dumbing down our children by not having very good content, very little content in our books as well.
Right.
So that's another issue that I have with today's books.
Yes, and literacy rates in the United States have plummeted. We have, I don't remember what the current rate is, but it is very sad for our country. If you can't read, you can't do anything else well in school. Reading is the building block for everything else, including math. Unfortunately, we've gotten away from the science of reading, and the way that we teach children to read now is not necessarily by using phonetics and sounding out, words. And it may be teaching children to rely on pictures, like look at the picture and what do you think this sentence is saying based on the picture. And it's really hurting our kids. And again, I believe it goes to the agenda of a population that's not informed is easier to control and break down the culture and then usher in a new system. I hate to bring everything back to that, but I feel like there is.
True.
Yeah.
It's true. Now, what are your thoughts on homeschooling? So earlier this month, there was a convention up in the Woodlands, and we actually went to it. Just if our school ever, tries to make our kids apologize for their race, I mean, they had no say in that. I don't understand why that's a good thing in some people's mind for a race to apologize for who God made them to be. But if there's ever a drag queen story hour, it will be like a thief in the night. We're yanking our kids out.
Right.
And so I just went for educational purposes for me. What curriculum's out there? What are the styles out there? That type of thing. So what are your thoughts on homeschooling?
I think homeschooling is great, and I think more parents should look into it. There's so many different ways to homeschool your children. There's lots of different curriculums you can use out there, and there's even online programs. We have not chosen to homeschool at this time, although one of my children did do an online program for a couple of years due to her gymnastics career. We also weren't super happy with the school that she was in at the time, but it's very possible. I've often said that I don't know if my youngest child is going to make it another 6 years in public education. I mentioned I have 2 college-age daughters now, and I have seen so many changes in just the last 5 to 10 years. So what my youngest son is experiencing compared to my older children, it's very sad to me. So I think homeschooling is a great option, and I think more parents should look into it. But we can't take our children out of a public school or even a private school and think we've solved this problem, because we are going to pay dearly if we continue to allow our tax dollars to teach children to hate America, hate each other, hate capitalism, to be highly sexualized, to be broken down from a mental health standpoint, we will pay as a country. So we can't just, be an ostrich with our neck in the sand.
Yeah. Run and hide. Our kids
Right.
are okay, but everyone else's kids are.
Exactly. And that's why there are honestly a lot of homeschool parents that are in Moms for Liberty. One of my dear friends is a chapter chair and she homeschools her children. But she realizes we've got to do something, and we can't do everything. We can't solve every problem. But if all of us get involved and use our time and our gifts and our talents in the ways that we can to speak out against tyranny, then as a group we can make a difference.
Right. It seems like once people's kids get to be a certain age, they're adults and they're getting older and they're like, well, what do I care?
Yeah.
They need to think, okay, when you're like 90 and you're in a retirement home or you're in hospice, what kind of moral system do you want your doctors and your bedside manner people to have? If they have no morals or ethics, they're not going to take very good care of you. So I do think it's everyone's job.
It is everyone's job, and it's our legacy. We are all leaving a legacy, whether we have children or not. And the choices we make in this life and the things that we do, those all have consequences down the road. And I feel like as a Christian, and I am a Christian, that it is my duty to speak out against evil in this world. And I feel compelled and called to do it. And I think it would be disobedient for me to not do that.
Absolutely. So what is Moms for Liberty's current relationship with the local school boards and educational officials? Is it collaborative? Is it tense? So is it somewhere in between? What's the relationship like?
It really depends on the school board, the individuals, involved. With my own school district, with many of the school board members, I have a very good collaborative relationship, and I love it. I mean, I can tell them about good things happening in the district, and I try to. I don't want to always be, this is a problem. Obviously, I'm going to let them know when I see issues, but I also tell them when I think they're getting things right, and I'm really grateful for anyone that serves on a school board or any public office, really, because and politicians get a bad rap, but it is a very sacrificial job to take, a public elected position, and you lose privacy. Right? There's a lot of things that you give up to take on that role. So I respect people that are willing to do that, and even if I think differently than them. I do have a tense relationship with a couple of the board members, especially in the past in my own school district, but most of them are collaborative, I would say, at this point. With other school districts, and we have 25 in Harris County, and I also care about the surrounding counties that are in the Houston area. We've built relationships like in Fort Bend ISD with different school board members, and Conroe ISD. Those are outside of Harris County, but I care about that, and I want to help them where I can if they want my help, right, or want some feedback. I want to be a resource, somebody that they come to bounce an idea around, or have you seen this, But there are some school districts where we probably have a little bit more of a tense relationship. But we're trying, one of the things that we've been doing, we have lots of partners and people we collaborate with within Moms for Liberty nationally. And one of those organizations is the 917 Society. And they are a nonpartisan group that exists to put pocket constitutions into the hands of students, particularly 8th graders, for Constitution Day in September. And so every year they work with us, because we have a lot of relationships within school districts, to try to get those pocket constitutions in for free, right? I mean, their donors are paying for it. But so this past year, I don't have the official numbers. We're still working on that, but we've donated around 9,000 pocket constitutions to local school districts, and that sounds like a lot, but it's really not. When you think about there's 25 school districts, and I sent out an email to different schools asking them. I didn't send it to all 25, to be fair. I started with like 10 or 12 that I wanted to target and see if they'd like to take this donation from both us and 917. And I only heard back from a few of them, which was really sad. Here I am offering a free pocket constitution resource, right? And there's also resources like teaching aids that you can use in the classroom for this. And it's a nonpartisan thing. It's just the Constitution. It's not teaching the Constitution a certain way. It's just, this is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So it's shocking to me that I didn't at least hear back. But we're going to keep working at it. We're going to, in Moms for Liberty, we have a saying, we're joyful warriors, and we fight like heck with a smile on our face because our children are watching. So if they just ignore me, I'm going to keep smiling. I'm going to keep emailing, keep calling, keep showing up at their board meetings. You know, I try to be firm but polite always.
Right.
And I stick to my convictions. But I'm going to try to do everything I do in a respectful manner.
Absolutely. Are there any specific policies that Moms for Liberty is advocating for on the local level right now?
So, you know, our 89th legislative session just wrapped up here in Texas, and we did endorse a bunch of bills, and we're still going through bill analysis. And I'm proud to say that a lot of the bills that we did endorse did pass, but the analysis comes in where, you know, a bill might start off a certain way, and then it goes through the process and the House and the Senate, and things get removed or, you know, added. And so I can't say complete victory on everything yet, but there are some good things that happened in this last session. And something that was very near and dear to my heart, because I've gotten to know this family, is the social transitioning of children that's happening in our schools here in Texas. We're not a blue state, right? But yet we still have social transition happening in our schools. And it's happening without parents even knowing. It's happening because you have maybe an activist teacher, or you have a school psychologist or counselor who thinks they're doing a good thing in helping a child, but their view of helping and your view may be very different, and their worldview and their lens that they're using is very different. And they are always going to probably be on the side of affirming a child when they come in and say that they are, you know, they're using different pronouns, or they are going by a different sex than they were assigned at birth. I hate that term, but
Me both.
Yes, but and so essentially, you know, they are saying, "Oh, we're the safe place for you to talk about this, and you don't have to worry about telling your parents." And what they're doing is putting a wedge between the parent and child relationship, and it's very damaging. Even if it's not medical transitioning a school is doing, and they're not necessarily, a school's not doing that, but they may provide the resources for medical transitioning things. But just social transitioning, I think some people think, well, that's not that harmful. It's just a pronoun.
It never stops there.
No, it doesn't. And it's psychologically very damaging. So there is a particular family that came to us that this had happened to their child in HISD. And I gave public comment at a board meeting in February that this was happening, just to even raise awareness that this is happening, because people will say it's not. And that was just, we had 1 minute public comment that day. I think that's pretty typical for HISD, because they have a lot of public, you know, comment speakers that come in. But in that 1 minute, we were able to raise awareness. It kind of went viral on social media, and Governor Abbott saw it and took action and decided to open a TEA investigation from that public comment. So that was great. So those are some of the things that we do and how we get locally engaged.
Well, that to be recognized by the governor is a big win.
Yes.
Now, Moms for Liberty has received strong reactions from, as we've mentioned, the LGBT community. Have you had or seen any experiences of actually finding common ground? This is something I think Charlie Kirk is very good at. He asks questions and may not come out agreeing, but at least we do have something in common.
Right. I think yes, definitely. We actually have members within the Moms for Liberty community that are, you know, LGBT. And whether you agree with their lifestyle or not, and I have my own personal opinion that, you know, and we all do, and I, you know, I'm a Christian, but it doesn't matter as long as we're all against the sexualization of children. And if we can find that common ground that you can have your lifestyle and what you do is your business, but we don't bring it to children. We don't explain, you know, how to perform same-sex, you know, acts. We don't do that. And that's what's happening in literature and in comprehensive sex ed. So if we can find that common ground, and we have, then we can be very powerful together. And there are a lot of really good activists out there in the LGBT community that are speaking out against the sexualization of children. So I'm grateful for that. That's good.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear and hugely encouraging. What would you say to parents who are hesitant to get involved? They may be intimidated by the politics of, school issues. How would you encourage them to get involved?
Well, being involved can look like different things, and not everybody is comfortable getting up in front of a group and giving public comment, and I recognize that. I encourage everybody to do it, but I recognize not everybody wants to do that. But you don't have to get up there and, give extemporaneous speech either.
Right.
You can have your thoughts typed out and just read from that, and that's anybody can kind of do that. But if you're not comfortable with that, I encourage you to at least email your board members or go and set up a meeting with them. Offer to have coffee with a school board member. Take them to lunch. Get to know them. At least communicate with them in some way. And not just school board members, your legislators. I mean, they work for us. Let them know that you're maybe not happy with what they're doing, or that you are happy with what they're doing, or you want them to do more. I think there needs to be good communication. We cannot be complacent. And I think one of the things that conservatives maybe do more than the left does is we say, okay, Donald Trump has won. We have...
My job's done.
Yeah, he's doing all this great stuff. I can sit back and relax, and I can go play golf and go back to watching my sports and my movies and hanging out and just not being engaged. No, we can't do that. The left doesn't do that. They are very good. They've been at school board meetings for decades. They've been involved in these institutions for decades. They've infiltrated intentionally these institutions for decades, including the church, and so we as conservatives have to go, you know what? It is a privilege to live in this country, to be able to have the right to vote, to have the freedoms that we have. As an active citizen in this country, I need to exercise all of my citizen duties, and that means I am staying involved and aware where I can. We can all invest a little bit of time and make sure that we're informed and holding our leaders accountable. So
exactly. And Donald Trump, he's one man, he's limited to one term, and there are forces that have been, like you mentioned, been at work a long time, and it is going to take everyone doing whatever they can to participate.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know about you. I feel that this month, the month of June, has really flown by. We're late in the month. Next thing you know, back to school season will be upon us. And so what is Moms for Liberty Harris County chapter doing to kick off the new fall season?
So I mentioned earlier, we're having our documentary showing that we're going to do on August 26th, and we'll be promoting that and posting more information, the details on all of that. But we're really excited for that, and I think it's going to be very eye-opening for Harris County residents to come and see that and maybe recognize that there are little things happening, whether it's in education, the institution of healthcare, in our churches, that are promoting these Marxist concepts and ideology. And I mentioned the mere exposure effect. Mere exposure is definitely a psychological phenomenon where the more you're exposed to something over time, the more you accept it.
Right.
And so a lot of this has happened to us without us even knowing. And of course, social media is very manipulative and is playing psychological mind games with us. And our opinions have been moved and swayed based on social media and even Google. I mean, there's lots of information about how Google has influenced elections, particularly in Georgia. There was some evidence that came out. Your viewers can go look someone up named Dr. Epstein. Not Jeffrey Epstein. It's a different Dr. Epstein has done a lot of work in that area, and I completely respect it. And he's not even a conservative. He'll tell you that. But it's very shocking how we're being manipulated. So anyway, we're going to have this documentary in August. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope people will join us for our meetings. We're going to have them at a local restaurant that's been very kind to us. So it's a fun atmosphere, and we're just going to have great discussion. We're going to learn. And we never want people to come away from our meetings feeling depressed and down. A lot of what we talk about is very hard to hear. And but we always have to remember, I believe this as a Christian, good will always triumph over evil. It doesn't mean that we don't have to fight, that we don't have to battle, that we can just sit back on our laurels. It means that we have to have trust and faith in God, that He will help us to conquer our enemies. but it's not, a quick fix. It's not something that's just going to happen overnight. But we can't put our head in the sand. We have to become informed individuals, what the issues are, so that we know our battle plan and how we can fight back. So that's what our meetings are there to do, to talk about some hard things, but get to know each other and have fellowship and link arms and realize that we're not in this alone.
That's a huge thing for me, is realizing we're not in the fight for alone. We just joined a new church and had dinner with them, and they left their Methodist church for the same reasons that we did. And we, our first day at this church, we came across couple after couple they joined this brand new baby church for the same exact reason. So it is heartwarming to know that there are people fighting alongside of you.
Yes. Dr. Mary Bowden is a tremendous hero to me here in the Houston area, and she's done so much to raise awareness about the dangers of the COVID vaccine. But she has a phrase that she says, and that's courage is contagious. And it is. So if I can be courageous and speak at a board meeting, maybe that will help you to have some courage so that you can at least email your board members, right? So I think if we recognize that every step that we take has a ripple effect and can impact the people that are in our circle. Well, if Denise can do it, I can do this, right?
Right.
So,
and our children are watching, and they're worth it.
That's right.
So to keep apprised of the details of the movie premiere, just follow Moms for Liberty on Facebook, or?
Yes. So the best way to follow us, we do have a page, a web portal. And if you just go to www.momsforliberty.org, and the 4 is FOR, so moms, plural, for liberty.org. You'll go there and you can click on Find My Chapter, and it'll pull up a map, and then hopefully you know what Harris County looks like there. You go click on Harris County, and then our page will pull up, and you'll see a picture of me and the other executive board members, but under my picture, it says email Denise, and so you can reach out to me there. You can also, on that page, join our chapter. It'll take you to a different link for that, and we do have 2 different forms of membership. We have a very small fee of $30 for dues-paying members, but with that, you get some extra benefits, like being a part of our closed Facebook group. We have some exclusive events, and of course, you can be a voting member if you're a dues-paying member, so you have right to vote on different things. And we do some special things like endorsement of school board candidates and whatnot, so being a voting member is a good thing. And you can hold a leadership position. We're always looking for people to get involved, so we love leaders. But you can also be an associate member of our chapter, and there's no cost to doing that. And if that's what you want to do, we'd love to have you. And then you'll get regular updates from us. But if you don't want to join, you just want to kind of keep connected to what we're doing, we also have an option from our webpage to sign up for our newsletter. And I do try to send a newsletter out about once a month to let people know what we're doing. And our meetings are open to anybody. Anybody can come as long as you're respectful. Yep. We can't have you detracting from what we're trying to do. But if you're going to sit there quietly, anybody can come. We have nothing to hide. And, we'd love to have honest, respectful dialogue with anyone that doesn't agree with us too, right? That's how we can find common ground and make change. So.
Lastly, I believe there's a Moms for Liberty National Convention later this year.
Yes.
So can you tell us more about that? Who's it for? What goes on there, and how people can support it?
Absolutely. So we have our summit coming up in October in Florida. It's going to be at the Gaylord Resort, which is a very nice resort. I believe it starts October 16th through the 18th, but you can go find those details on the momsforliberty.org webpage. There's a whole section on events, and summit will pop up for that. But it's just really a great time where we have lots of different, very incredible speakers. Donald Trump came to summit last year. I don't know if he's going to come this year.
A little busy.
Right, but in the past, we've had people like James Lindsay, Tulsi Gabbard, Sebastian Gorka has been there. I mean, it's just incredible conservative voices. I do want to say Moms for Liberty is a nonpartisan organization. I always say we're conservative valued, but we will partner with anybody on mission. And I think the terms Republican and Democrat aren't as important anymore.
Right.
I think it's more about, how you view the world and parental rights. And so there could be some Democrats that maybe identify more as a conservative value person and believe in parental rights being God-given and fundamental. So we will partner with anybody on mission. I don't want to give the impression that we won't. And anyway, Summit is a great opportunity to come and learn more about our organization and hear from incredible speakers from all across the United States and even maybe some global speakers. And then we also have just some good training that happens at those events, plus networking. You meet incredible people across the United States that are working to protect parental rights. So,
well, that sounds like a great time. And thank you so much for your time today. And It's great to learn so much about Moms for Liberty.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's it for Azimuth Podcast. Have a great day. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all of the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.